So you want to be a wizard. Prologue. Part of the problem, Nita thought as she tore desperately down Rose Avenue, is that I can't keep my mouth shut. She had been running for 5 minutes now, hopping fences, sliding sideways through hedges, but she was losing her wind. Some ways behind her, she could hear Joanne and Glenda and the rest of them pounding along in pursuit, threatening to replace her latest, now fading black eye. Well, Joanne would come up to her with that new bike, all chrome and silver, and gear shift levers and speedometer / odometer and toe clips and water bottle, and ask what she thought of it. So Nita had told her. Actually, she had told Joanne what she thought of her. The bike was all right. In fact, it had been almost exactly the one that Nita had wanted so much for her last birthday. The birthday when she got nothing but clothes. Life can be really rotten sometimes, Nita thought. She wasn't really so irritated about that at the moment, however. Running away from a beating was taking up most of her attention. Callahan! Came a yell from behind her. I'm going to pound you up and mail you home in bottles. I wonder how many bottles it'll take, Nita thought, without much humor. She couldn't afford to laugh. With their bikes, they'd catch up to her pretty quickly. And then she tried not to think of the scene there would be later at home. Her father raising hands and eyes to the ceiling, wondering loudly enough for the whole house to hear, "Why didn't you hit them back?" Her sister making belligerent noises over her new battle scars, her mother shaking her head, looking away silently, because she understood. It was her sad look that would hurt Nita more than the bruises and scrapes and swollen face would. Her mom would shake her head and clean the hurts up and sigh. Crud, Nita thought. The breath was coming hard to her now. She was going to have to try to hide, to wait them out. But where? Most of the people around here didn't want kids running through their yards. There was old Crazy Swell's house, with its big landscaped yard, but the rumors among the neighborhood kids said that weird things happened in there. Nita herself had noticed that the guy didn't go to work like normal people. Better to get beat up again than go in there, but where can I hide? She kept on running down Rose Avenue, and the answer presented itself to her. A little brown brick building with windows warmly alight. Refuge, safety, sanctuary. The library. It's open! It's open! I forgot it was open late on Saturday. Oh, thank heaven. The sight of it gave Nita a new burst of energy. She cut across its tidy lawn, loped up the walk, took the 5 stairs to the porch in 2 jumps, bumped open the front door and closed it behind her, a little too loudly. The library had been a private home once, and it hadn't lost the look of one. Despite the crowding of all its rooms with bookshelves. The walls were paneled in mahogany and oak, and the place smelled warm and brown and booky. At the thump of the door, Mrs. Lesser, the weekend librarian, glanced up from her desk, about to say something sharp. Then she saw who was standing there and how hard she was breathing. Mrs. Lesser frowned at Nita and then grinned. She didn't miss much. There's no one downstairs, she said, nodding at the door that led to the children's library in the single big basement room. Keep quiet, and I'll get rid of them. Thanks, Nita said, and went thumping down the cement stairs. As she reached the bottom, she heard the bump and squeak of the front door opening again. Nita paused to try to hear voices, and found that she couldn't. Doubting that her pursuers could hear her either, she walked on into the children's library, smiling slightly at the books and the bright posters. She still loved the place. She loved any library, big or little. There was something about all that knowledge, all those facts waiting patiently to be found, that never failed to give her a shiver. When friends couldn't be found, the books were always waiting with something new to tell. Life that was getting too much the same could be shaken up in a few minutes by the picture in a book of some ancient temple newly discovered deep in a rainforest, a fuzzy photo of Uranus with its up and down rings, or a prismed picture taken through the faceted eye of a bee. And though she would rather have died than admit it, no respectable 13-year-old ever set foot down there, she still loved the children's library too. Nita had gone through every book in the place when she was younger, reading everything in sight, fiction and nonfiction alike. Fairy tales, science books, horse stories, dog stories, music books, art books, even the encyclopedias. Bookworm. She heard the old jeering voices go in her head. 4 eyes, smart ass, hide in the house and read. Walking encyclopedia, think you're so hot. No, she remembered herself answering once. I just like to find things out. And she sighed, feeling rueful. That time she had found out about being punched in the stomach. She strolled between shelves, looking at titles, smiling as she met old friends. Books she had read 3 times, or 5 times, or a dozen. Just a title or an author's name would be enough to summon up happy images. Strange creatures, like phoenixes and simiads, moving under smoky London daylight of 100 years before. In company with groups of bemused children, starships and new worlds, and the limitless vistas of interstellar night. Outer space challenged, but never conquered. Princesses in silver and golden dresses, princes and heroes carrying swords like sharpened lines of light. Monsters rising out of weedy tarns, wild creatures that talked and tricked one another. I used to think the world would be like that when I got older. Wonderful all the time, exciting, happy, instead of the way it is. Something stopped Nita's hand as it ran along the bookshelf. She looked and found that one of the books, a little library-bound volume in shiny red buckram, had a loose thread at the top of its spine, on which her finger had caught. She pulled the finger free, glanced at the title. Is one of those So You Want to Be a books, a series on careers. So you want to be a pilot, there had been, and so you want to be a scientist, a nurse, a writer. But this one said, so you want to be a wizard. What? Nita pulled the book off the shelf, surprised not so much by the title as by the fact that she'd never seen it before. She thought she knew the whole stock of the children's library, yet this wasn't a new book. It had plainly been there for some time. The pages had that yellow look about their edges, the color of aging, and the top of the book was dusty. So you want to be a wizard. Hirenson, the spine said. That was the author's name. Phoenix Press, the publisher. And then in white ink, in Mrs. Lesser's tidy handwriting, 973.4, the Dewey Decimal number. This has to be a joke, Nita said to herself, but the book looked exactly like all the others in the series. She opened it carefully so as not to crack the binding, and turned the first few pages to the table of contents. Normally, Nita was a fast reader and would quickly have finished a page with only a few lines on it. But what she found on that contents page slowed her down a great deal. Preliminary determinations, a question of aptitude, wizardly preoccupations and predilections, basic equipment, and milius, introduction to spells, bindings, and gyasa, familiars and helpmeets, advice to the initiate, psychotropic spelling. Psycho what? Nita turned to the page on which that chapter began, looking at the bold-faced paragraph beneath its title. Warning. Spells of power sufficient to make temporary changes in the human mind are always subject to sudden and unpredictable backlash on the user. The practitioner is cautioned to make sure that his or her motives are benevolent before attempting spelling aimed at I don't believe this, Nita thought. She shut the book and stood there holding it in her hand, confused, amazed, suspicious, and delighted. If it was a joke, it was a great one. If it wasn't, don't be silly. But if it isn't? People were clumping around upstairs, but Nita hardly heard them. She sat down at one of the low tables and started reading the book in earnest. The first couple of pages were a foreword. Wizardry is one of the most ancient and misunderstood of arts. Its public image for centuries has been one of a mysterious pursuit, practice in occult surroundings, and usually used at the peril of one's soul. The modern wizard, who works with tools more advanced than bat's blood and beings more complex than medieval demons, knows how far from the truth that image is. Wizardry, though exciting and interesting, is not a glamorous business, especially these days when a wizard must work quietly, so as not to attract undue attention. For those willing to assume the art's responsibilities and do the work, though, wizardry has many rewards. The sight of a formerly twisted growing thing, now growing straight, of a snarled motivation untangled, the satisfaction of hearing what a plant is thinking or a dog is saying, of talking to a stone or a star, is thought by most to be well worth the labor. Not everyone is suited to be a wizard. Those without enough of the necessary personality traits will never see this manual for what it is. That you have found it at all says a great deal for your potential. The reader is invited to examine the next few chapters and determine his or her wizardly potential in detail, to become familiar with the scope of the art, and finally to decide whether to become a wizard. Good luck! It's a joke, Nita thought. Really? And to her own amazement, she wouldn't believe herself. She was too fascinated. She turned to the next chapter. Preliminary determinations. An aptitude for wizardry requires more than just the desire to practice the art. There are certain inborn tendencies, and some acquired ones, that enable a person to become a wizard. This chapter will list some of the better documented of wizardly characteristics. Please bear in mind that it isn't necessary to possess all the qualities listed, or even most of them. Some of the greatest wizards have been lacking in the qualities possessed by almost all others, and have still achieved startling competence levels. Slowly at first, then more eagerly, Nita began working her way through the assessment chapter, pausing only to get a pencil and a scrap paper from the checkout desk so that she could make notes on her aptitude. She was brought up short by the footnote to one page. Where ratings are not assigned, as in rural areas, the area of greatest population density will usually produce the most wizards due to the thinning of world walls with increased population concentration. Nita stopped reading, amazed. Thinning of world walls. Were they saying that there are other worlds, other dimensions, and that things could get through? Things or people? She sat there and wondered. All the old fairy tales about people falling down wells into magical countries, or slipping backward in time, or forward into it. Did this mean that such things could actually happen? If you could actually go into other worlds, other places, and come back again. Who would believe anybody who came back and told a story like that? Even if they took pictures. But who cares? She answered herself fiercely. If only it could be true. She turned her attention back to the book and went on reading. Though, skeptically, the whole thing still felt like a game. But abruptly, it stopped being a game with one paragraph. Wizards love words. Most of them read a great deal, and indeed, one strong sign of a potential wizard is the inability to get to sleep without reading something first. But their love for and fluency with words is what makes wizards a force to be reckoned with. Their ability to convince a piece of the world, a tree, say, or a stone, that it's not what it thinks it is, that it's something else, is the very heart of wizardry. Words skillfully used, their persuasive voice, the persuading mind are the wizard's most basic tools. With them, a wizard can stop a tidal wave, talk a tree out of growing, or into it, freeze fire, burn rain, even slow down the death of the universe. That last, of course, is the reason there are wizards. See the next chapter. Nita stopped short. The universe was running down. All the energy in it was slowly being used up. She knew that from studying astronomy, the process called entropy. But she'd never heard anyone talking about slowing it down before. She shook her head in amazement and went on to the correlations section at the end of the chapter, where all the factors involved in the makeup of a potential wizard were listed. Nita found that she had a lot of them, enough to be a wizard if she wanted to. With rising excitement, she turned to the next chapter. Theory and Implications of Wizardry. The heading said, History, Philosophy, and the Wizard's Oath. 50 or 60 eons ago, when life brought itself about, it also brought about to accompany it many powers and potentialities to manage the business of creation. One of the greatest of these powers held aloof for a long time, watching its companions work, not wishing to enter into creation until it could contribute something, unlike anything the other powers had made, something completely new and original. Finally, the lone power found what it was looking for. Others had invented planets, light, gravity, space. The lone power invented death and bound it irrevocably into the worlds. Shortly thereafter, the other powers joined forces and cast the lone one out. Many versions of the story are related among the many worlds, assigning blame or praise to one party or another. However, none of the stories change the fact that entropy and its symptom, death, are here now. To attempt to halt or remove them is as futile as attempting to ignore them. Therefore, there are wizards to handle them. A wizard's business is to conserve energy, to keep it from being wasted. On the simplest level, this includes such unmagical-looking actions as paying one's bills on time, turning off the lights when you go out, and supporting the people around you in getting their lives to work. It also includes a great deal more. Because wizardly people tend to be good with language, they can also become skillful with the speech, the magical tongue in which objects and living creatures can be described with more accuracy than in any human language. And what can be so accurately described can also be preserved, or freed to become yet greater. A wizard can cause an inanimate object or animate creature to grow, or to stop growing, to be what it is, or something else. A wizard, using the speech, can cause death to slow down, or go somewhere else and come back later, just as the lone power caused it to come about in the first place. Creation, preservation, destruction, transformation, all are a matter of causing the fabric of being to do what you want it to do. And the speech is the key. Nita stopped to think this over for a moment. It sounds like, if you know what something is, truly know, you don't have any trouble working with it. Like my telescope. If it acts up, I know every piece of it, and it only takes a second to get it working again. To have that kind of control over everything, living things, the world even. She took a deep breath and looked back at the book, beginning to get an idea of what kind of power was implied there. The power conferred by use of the speech has, of course, one insurmountable limitation: the existence of death itself, as one renowned senior wizard has remarked. Entropy has us outnumbered. No matter how much preserving we do, the universe will eventually die. But it will last longer because of our efforts. And since no one knows for sure whether another universe will be born from the ashes of this one, the effort seems worthwhile. No one should take the wizard's oath who is not committed to making wizardry a lifelong pursuit. The energy invested in a beginning wizard is too precious to be thrown away. Yet there are no penalties for withdrawal from the art, except the knowledge that the universe will die a little faster because of energy lost. On the other hand, there are no prizes for the service of life, except life itself. The wizard gets the delight of working in a specialized area, magic, and gets a good look at the foundations of the universe, the way things really work. It should be stated here that there are people who consider the latter more of a curse than a blessing. Such wizards usually lose their art. Magic does not live in the unwilling soul. Should you decide to go ahead and take the oath, be warned that an ordeal of sorts will follow, a test of aptitude. If you pass, wizardry will ensue. Yeah, Nita thought. And what if you don't pass? Nita. Mrs. Lester's voice came floating down the stairs, and a moment later she herself appeared, large brunette lady with kind eyes and a look of eternal concern. You still alive? I was reading. So what else is new? They're gone. Thanks, Miss L. What was all that about anyway? Oh, Joanne was looking to pick a fight again. Mrs. Lester raised an eyebrow at Nita, and Nita smiled back at her shamefacedly. She didn't miss much. Well, I might have helped her a little. I guess it's hard, Mrs. Lester said. I doubt I could be nice all the time myself if I had that lot on my back. That the only one you want today? Or should I just have the non-fiction section boxed and sent over to your house? No, this is enough, Nita said. If my father sees too many books, he'll just make me bring them back. Mrs. Lesser sighed. Reading one book is like eating one potato chip, she said. So you'll be back Monday. There's more where that came from. I'll check it out for you. Nita felt in her pockets hurriedly. Oh, crud. Mrs. L, I don't have my card. So you'll bring it back Monday, she said, handing her back the book as they reached the landing. And I'll stamp it then. I trust you. Thanks, Nita said. Don't mention it. Be careful going home, Mrs. Lester said, and have a nice read. I will. Nita went out and stood on the doorstep, looking around in the deepening gloom. Dinner time was getting close, and the wind was getting cold, with the smell of rain to it. The book in her hand seemed to prickle a little, as if it were impatient to be read. She started jogging toward home, taking a circuitous route, up Washington from Rose Avenue, then through town, along Nassau Road, and down East Clinton, a path meant to confound pursuit. She didn't expect that they would be waiting for her only a block away from her house, where there were no alternate routes to take. And when they were through with her, the six of them, one of Nita's eyes was blackened, and the knee Joanne had so carefully stomped on felt swollen with liquid fire. Nita just laid there for a long while, on the spot where they left her, behind the O'Donnell's hedge. The O'Donnells were out of town. There she lay and cried, as she would not in front of Joanne and the rest, as she would not until she was safely in bed and out of her family's earshot. Whether she provoked these situations or not, they kept happening, and there was nothing she could do about them. Joanne and her hangers-on had found out that Nita didn't like to fight. Wouldn't try until her rage broke loose. Then it was too late. She was too hurt to fight well. All her self-defense lessons went out of her head with the pain. And they knew it, and at least once a week found a way to sucker her into a fight. Or, if that failed, they would simply ambush her. All right. She had purposely baited Joanne today. But there'd been a fight coming anyway. And she had chosen to start it rather than wait, getting angrier and angrier while they baited her. But this would keep happening, again and again, and there was nothing she could do about it. Oh, I wish we could move. I wish Dad would say something to Joanne's father. No, that would just make it worse. If only something could just happen to make it stop. Underneath her, where it had fallen, the book dug into Nita's sore ribs. The memory of what she had been reading flooded back through her pain and was followed by a wash of wild surmise. If there are spells to keep things from dying, then I bet there are spells to keep people from hurting you. Then Nita scowled at herself in contempt for actually believing for a moment what couldn't possibly be more than an elaborate joke. She put aside thoughts of the book and slowly got up, brushing herself off and discovering some new bruises. She also discovered something else. Her favorite pen was gone, her space pen, a present from her Uncle Joel. The pen that could write on butter or glass or upside down, her pen with which she had never failed a test, even in math. She patted herself all over, checked the ground, searched in pockets where she knew the pen couldn't be. No use. It was gone. Or taken, rather, for it had been securely clipped to her front jacket pocket when Joanne and her group jumped her. It must have fallen out, and one of them picked it up. Ah! Nita moaned, feeling bitter enough to start crying again. But she was all cried out, and she ate too much, and it was a waste. She stepped around the hedge and limped the little distance home. Her house was pretty much like any other on the block, a white frame house with fake shutters. But where other houses had their lawns, Nita's had a beautifully landscaped garden. Ivy carpeted the ground, and the flower beds against the house had something blooming in every season, except the dead of winter. Nita trudged up the driveway without bothering to smell any of the spring flowers, went up the stairs to the back door, pushed it open, and walked into the kitchen as nonchalantly as she could. Her mother was elsewhere, but the delicious smells of her cooking filled the place. Veal cutlets tonight. Nita peered into the oven, saw potatoes baking, lifted a pot lid, and found corn on the cob in the steamer. Her father looked up from the newspaper he was reading at the dining room table. He was a big, blunt, good-looking man, with startling silver hair and large, capable hands. An artist's hands, he would chuckle as he pieced together a flower arrangement. He owned the smaller of the town's 2 flower shops, and he loved his work dearly. He had done all the landscaping around the house in his spare time, and around several neighbors' houses too, refusing to take anything in return but the satisfaction of being up to his elbows in a flower bed. Whatever he touched grew. I have an understanding with the plants, he would say, and it certainly seemed that way. It was people he sometimes had trouble understanding, and particularly his eldest daughter. "My lord, Nita," her father exclaimed, putting the paper down flat on the table. His voice was shocked. "What happened?" "As if you don't know," Nita thought. She could clearly see the expressions going across her father's face. "My God," they said. "She's done it again." Or, "My God," they said. "She's done it again. Why doesn't she fight back? What's wrong with her?" He would get around to asking that question at one point or another, and Nita would try to explain it again, and as usual, her father would try to understand and would fail. Nita turned away and opened the refrigerator door, peering at nothing in particular, so that her father wouldn't see the grimace of impatience and irritation on her face. She was tired of the whole ritual, but she had to put up with it. It was as inevitable as being beaten up. "I was in a fight," she said, the second verse of the ritual, the second line on the scene. Tiredly, she closed the refrigerator door, put the book down on the counter beside the stove, and peeled off her jacket, examining it for rips and ground and dirt and blood. "So how many of them did you take out?" her father said, turning his eyes back to the newspaper. His face still showed exasperation and puzzlement. Anita sighed. "He looks about as tired of this as I am, but really, he knows the answers." "I'm not sure," Nita said. "There were 6 of them." 6? Nita's mother came around the corner from the living room and into the bright kitchen, danced in, actually. Just watching her made Nita smile sometimes, and it did now, though changing expressions hurt. She had been a dancer before she married Dad, and the grace with which she moved made her every action around the house seem polished, endlessly rehearsed, lovely to look at. She glided with the laundry, floated while she cooked. "Loading the odds a bit, weren't they?" "Yeah, Nita." Nita was hurting almost too much to feel like responding to the gentle humor. Her mother caught the pain in her voice and stopped to touch Nita's face as she passed, assessing the damage and conveying how she felt about it in one brief gesture, without saying anything that anyone else but the 2 of them might hear. "No setting up for you tonight, kidlet," her mother said. Bed and ice on that, before you swell up like a balloon. What started it? Her dad asked from the dining room. Jan Varela, Nita said. She has a new bike, and I didn't get as excited about it as she thought I should. Nita's father looked up from the paper again, and this time there was discomfort in his face and regret. Nita, he said, I couldn't afford